For 25 years, a woman lived in total darkness while the world above her continued to laugh, fall in love, and forget. I want you to imagine this for a moment. Not a prison built by the state, not chains, not bars, not guards, just a locked bedroom in a respectable house in a quiet French city, owned by one of the most honorable families of their time. And inside that room, slowly disappearing from history, was Blanche Monnier. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't insane. She didn't commit murder, theft, or betrayal. Her crime was much simpler. She fell in love with the wrong man, and she refused to obey her mother. That single act of defiance erased her existence for a quarter of a century, while Paris celebrated art, progress, and modernity. While the Belle Epoque praised elegance and morality, Blanche Monnier was rotting in a proper five sealed room, surrounded by filth, insects, and silence. No mirrors, no sunlight, no human touch. People spoke her name at dinner parties, but only as a mystery. She ran. Away, they said. She chose another life, they whispered. Some even admired her supposed rebellion, but the truth was far worse. Because Blanche didn't escape society, she was erased by it. And the most terrifying part, everyone who mattered lived just outside that locked door. Tonight, I'm not telling you a ghost story. I'm telling you something more disturbing, a true story about love, control, social reputation, and how a mother's obsession with honor turned her own daughter into a living corpse. This is not just the story of Blanche Monnier. It's a story about what happens when obedience matters more than humanity. For 25 years, a woman lived in total darkness while the world above her continued to laugh, fall in love, and forget. I want you to imagine this for a moment. Not a prison built by the state, not chains, not bars, not guards. Just a locked bedroom in a respectable house in a quiet French city owned by one of the most honorable families of their time. And inside that room, slowly disappearing from history, was Blanche Monnier. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't insane. She didn't commit murder, theft, or betrayal. Her crime was much simpler. She fell in love with the wrong man, and she refused to obey her mother. That single act of defiance erased her existence for a quarter of a century. While Paris celebrated art, progress, and modernity, while the Belle Epoque praised elegance and morality, Blanche Monnier was rotting in a sealed room, surrounded by filth, insects, and silence. No mirrors, no sunlight, no human touch. People spoke her name at dinner parties, but only as a mystery. She ran. Away, they said. She chose another life, they whispered. Some even admired her supposed rebellion, but the truth was far worse. Because Blanche didn't escape society, she was erased by it. And the most terrifying part, everyone who mattered lived just outside that locked door. Tonight, I'm not telling you a ghost story. I'm telling you something more disturbing, a true story about love, control, social reputation, and how a mother's obsession with honor turned her own daughter into a living corpse. This is not just the story of Blanche Monnier. It's a story about what happens when obedience matters more than humanity. Before the door was locked, Blanche Monnier's life followed a path that looked almost perfect from the outside. She was born into comfort, not extravagance, but security, the kind of life where nothing truly terrible was supposed to happen. As a young woman, Blanche moved easily through polite society. She attended gatherings, exchanged pleasantries, learned music and manners. People saw her as gentle, quiet, and compliant. No one imagined her as rebellious. No one imagined her as dangerous. And that is what makes her fall so unsettling. Because Blanche did not fall through scandal, she fell through love. At some point in her 20s, Blanche met a man her mother despised. He was not violent. He was not immoral. He was simply unsuitable, older, financially unstable, and lacking the social standing Louise Monnier demanded. To Blanche, he represented something forbidden: choice. She wanted to marry him, not negotiate, not wait, not compromise. She wanted her own life. That moment was the beginning of the end. At first, the conflict stayed verbal. Arguments behind closed doors, raised voices, tears, ultimatums. Louise demanded obedience. Blanche refused. And here is where the story turns dark in a way that still chills me. Because Louise did not lose control in a fit of rage. She calculated, she understood the system she lived in. A single woman dependent on her family. No independent income, no legal protection from parental authority. Blanche's refusal placed her outside the acceptable order of things. So Louise chose the quietest solution possible. She removed Blanche from sight. The door to Blanche's bedroom was locked. The shutters were sealed. And the world went on. In the early days, Blanche likely believed it would end, that this was pressure, not a life sentence, that eventually her mother would relent. But the days did not soften Louise. They hardened her. Meals became scarce. Light disappeared. Conversation stopped. Blanche's room turned into a sealed ecosystem of decay. Food scraps attracted rats. Insects multiplied. The stench became permanent. And still, no one intervened. Louise's son, Marcel Monnier, lived in the same house. And this is where the story becomes even more disturbing, because Marcel knew. He grew up. He aged. He pursued his own life. And all the while, his sister remained locked above him. There are no heroic acts here, no secret attempts to free her, no resistance, only silence. Years passed, then decades. Blanche's body adapted to darkness in ways that feel almost inhuman. Her eyes became painfully sensitive to light. Her muscles atrophied. Her mind retreated inward. Time lost meaning. Imagine not knowing whether it is morning or night. Imagine never seeing your reflection for years. Imagine hearing voices downstairs but never being spoken to. This wasn't imprisonment with purpose. It was slow erasure. The decline was total. Blanche did not lose her beauty. She lost her humanity. By the time authorities would later find her, she weighed barely more than a child. Her hair was matted. Her nails grew unchecked. Her body was covered in filth. But the most tragic detail is this. She was still alive. Not numb, not unconscious, alive. She reacted to voices. She responded to kindness. This wasn't a woman who had disappeared mentally. This was a woman who had endured. And all of it happened while her mother continued to attend social events, donate to charities, and receive public recognition for her morality. That contrast is unbearable, because while Blanche was deteriorating upstairs, Louise Monnier was being praised downstairs. What began as a punishment became a system, a routine, a secret so normalized that it no longer felt shocking to those who lived with it. The decline wasn't just Blanche's. It was the moral collapse of an entire household. And soon, that collapse would no longer stay hidden, because secrets like this do not disappear. They rot. And eventually, they smell too strong to ignore. The truth didn't arrive with a scream. It arrived with a letter, an anonymous letter. No signature, no emotion, just a few lines written with enough clarity to force action. It claimed that a woman had been locked inside a house in Poitiers for decades, starved, hidden, forgotten. At first, authorities hesitated. Accusations against a respected family were dangerous. Reputations mattered, and the Monniers had one of the cleanest in the city. But something about the letter felt too specific to ignore. When police arrived at the house, nothing seemed out of place. The furniture was elegant. The air downstairs smelled normal. Louise greeted them with composure, irritation even. She was offended by the implication. Then they went upstairs. The door was locked. The smell came first, not the smell of old age or sickness, but the smell of neglect layered over time. When the door was forced open, the room revealed something that didn't belong to the living world. Blanche lay on a filthy mattress, naked, skeletal, surrounded by waste and insects. The shutters were nailed shut. Darkness had been her only companion for 25 years. When light entered the room, Blanche screamed, not because she was afraid, but because light physically burned her eyes. Witnesses later said she recoiled like an animal dragged into daylight. Her body trembled, her skin reacted violently, and yet, when spoken to gently, she responded. She whispered. She begged. She said she was cold. She said she was hungry. That detail alone destroys every attempt to romanticize or soften this story. Blanche was still there. Her mind had not vanished. Her soul had not left. She had simply been waiting. Louise Monnier was arrested almost immediately. But here is something that unsettles me deeply. Louise did not collapse. She did not confess. She did not beg forgiveness. She maintained that she had acted out of necessity, that she was protecting her daughter, that Blanche was unstable, that it was all misunderstood. And then, before justice could fully confront her, Louise died in custody. No trial, no sentence. Just an ending that feels far too gentle for the damage done. Marcel, Blanche's brother, did stand trial. His defense was chilling in its simplicity. He claimed obedience. He claimed loyalty. He claimed fear of his mother. The court showed mercy. He served a reduced sentence. And Blanche? Blanche was taken to a hospital. The world expected recovery, salvation, a return to humanity. But trauma does not dissolve in fresh air. Blanche struggled with light, sound, and touch. She was terrified of open spaces. She resisted clothing. She resisted mirrors. She resisted the world that had abandoned her. Doctors tried to rehabilitate her. Journalists tried to interview her. The public turned her into a symbol. Some called her a martyr. Others called her mad. Few understood her. She was transferred to a psychiatric institution where she lived the remainder of her life. Not free, just relocated. This is the part people rarely want to sit with. Rescue does not erase damage. Blanche survived imprisonment, but she never reclaimed the life that was stolen from her. She died years later, still bearing the psychological scars of confinement. And public reaction? Outrage, shock, then distance. The case horrified France. Newspapers printed illustrations of the dark room. Editorials questioned maternal authority, family power, and social blindness. For a moment, society looked into the mirror. And then, slowly, it looked away. Because acknowledging Blanche Monnier fully would require admitting something unbearable, that cruelty does not always come from monsters. Sometimes it comes from mothers, from brothers, from neighbors who choose silence. Sometimes it comes from a society that values reputation more than truth. The Monnier house became infamous, but infamy fades. What lingers is the uncomfortable question no one likes to ask. How many people sensed something was wrong and chose comfort over confrontation? Because Blanche's suffering wasn't hidden underground. It was upstairs, in plain sight. When I first encountered this story, I didn't see it as a historical curiosity. I saw it as a warning. Because the most disturbing part of Blanche Monnier's story isn't the locked door, the darkness, or even the 25 years stolen from her life. It's how normal everything around it looked. This wasn't a war zone. This wasn't a slum. This wasn't a place society had abandoned. This was a respectable home, a respected family, a mother praised for her virtue, and that's exactly why this story matters. We like to believe cruelty announces itself loudly, that abuse wears obvious masks, that evil is chaotic, violent, and impossible to miss. But Blanche's life proves the opposite. Sometimes cruelty is organized, sometimes it is polite. Sometimes it is justified as discipline, duty, or protection. From this channel's perspective, Blanche Monnier is not just a victim of one mother's obsession. She is the product of a system that allowed absolute parental control over women's lives, especially unmarried daughters. A system where a woman's desires were considered dangerous if they conflicted with family honor, where obedience was mistaken for morality, where love, especially female love, was something to be controlled, not respected. And what troubles me deeply is how easily people around the Monnier household accepted the disappearance. She must have left. She must have chosen another life. She must have been unstable. Those explanations were comforting. They allowed society to avoid asking harder questions. This channel exists to sit with those uncomfortable truths, to examine what happens when power is concentrated inside private spaces where no one wants to look too closely. Blanche's imprisonment forces us to question something we still struggle with today. How many forms of abuse survive because they are wrapped in tradition? How often does control masquerade as care? How many people are silenced, not by force, but by reputation? And let's talk about the brother. It's easy to focus all our anger on the mother, but silence has accomplices. Doing nothing is not neutral. Marcel Monnier lived his life while his sister rotted upstairs. He chose safety over courage, order over justice, comfort over humanity, and society rewarded him with leniency. That should unsettle us because it reveals a pattern we still see. Those who maintain the status quo are often forgiven. Those who disrupt it are punished. Blanche disrupted it by loving someone she was not supposed to love. That was enough. From this channel's point of view, Blanche Monnier represents a category of stories that are often forgotten because they don't fit clean narratives. There is no redemption arc here, no triumphant escape, no late life justice, just survival, followed by permanent damage. And that is exactly why her story deserves to be told. Not as spectacle, not as shock value, but as a reminder that behind many perfect families, there may be locked doors we never question. I want to ask you something honestly. If you lived in Poitiers at that time, if you knew the Monnier personally, if you respected Louise Monnier, would you have believed the rumors? Would you have knocked on that door? Or would you have chosen the comfort of disbelief? Because history isn't just shaped by villains. It's shaped by ordinary people deciding when to look away. And Blanche Monnier paid the price for that choice. This channel doesn't exist to tell you what to think. It exists to make sure stories like this don't disappear quietly again. Blanche Monnier did not return to the world as the woman she once was. She returned as someone altered beyond repair. After her rescue, people expected transformation. They wanted to believe that sunlight, food, freedom could undo 25 years of darkness. That there would be a moment where Blanche stood up, spoke clearly, and reclaimed what was stolen. That moment never came. Blanche lived the rest of her life in institutions, moving from one controlled space to another. The doors were no longer locked by her mother, but the walls still existed. Her fear of light never fully faded. Her body remained fragile. Her mind, shaped by decades of isolation, could not simply rejoin the rhythm of normal life. And yet, she was no longer completely erased. Her name survived. What stays with me is not the image of the dark room, but the silence that followed her rescue. After the newspapers moved on, after the outrage cooled, Blanche slipped back into obscurity. No monuments, no public apology, no real reckoning. Her mother died without facing a full trial. Her brother served a reduced sentence and returned to society. The city returned to normal. Blanche carried the consequences alone. This is the quiet cruelty of history. The ones who suffer most rarely get closure. The ones who cause harm often get explanations, excuses, and forgiveness. Blanche Monnier's story lingers not because it is sensational, but because it exposes something deeply human. The need to thing, control, the fear of shame, the willingness to sacrifice another person's life for social order. When people talk about her now, they often call her the woman locked in, is a room. But that misses the point. Blanche was not defined by that room. She was defined by what she endured inside it. She survived 25 years without love, touch, or freedom, and still responded to kindness when it finally arrived. That alone speaks volumes. Some stories are loud. They end with justice, revenge, or redemption. This one ends quietly, with a woman who never asked to be a symbol, but became one anyway. A reminder that the most dangerous prisons are sometimes built inside families that respectability can hide. Unimaginable harm. That obedience, when demanded without compassion, can destroy lives. Blanche Monnier's life asks us to remember something uncomfortable. That silence can be as violent as action. That ignoring suffering is a choice. That doing nothing is never neutral. Some stories were never meant to be known. But now you know this one. And once you know it, you can't unknow it. That is her legacy.